top story, tragedy struck when an American Airlines flight collided with a military helicopter over Washington, D.C., crashing into the Potomac River near the Reagan National Airport. The incident involved 64 passengers and crew on the plane, 3 on the helicopter, and it is believed that there are no survivors. We can go straight across now to Caroline Malone. Thanks, Caroline, very much for being with us. In terms of recovery of the mortal remains of those who've perished, has there been any progress? Are divers still in action at this stage?
Yes, we believe tragically that no one is thought to have survived this horrible accident, but it's very much a recovery mission that is underway here in the Potomac River just behind me. You can see, I think, as well, the air traffic control tower of the airport just behind me as well. That, of course, would have been where people would have been speaking to the pilots just before this accident at 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, coordinating their missions and their flight paths above Reagan Airport. Now, in terms of continuing to look for bodies, the last we heard early this morning was that, up to 30 bodies had been recovered. But we believe, there will be many more that will be recovered in the hours ahead, something like 64 people on that plane, on that American Airlines flight, 60 passengers, 4 of those were crew and the pilots, and then an additional 3 people from the Black Hawk helicopter. Now, in terms of what happened, there's still a lot that we don't know. There's still a lot of questions that are unanswered. The black boxes from the plane will be able to give us a better idea of how this ended up happening. Certainly, we have, had some speculation from people that have flown these flights before, pilots that have actually taken these routes before, suggesting it has to be some kind of procedural error. A lot of, focus right now is on what the pilots would have been able to see in the air. The Black Hawk helicopter, we believe the pilots on board from the Army were doing training flights. We believe that these are annual flights that they would have been used to be doing, that they had night vision goggles on board, which would have helped them in terms of their vision. But, sometimes, of course, it can be tricky to see different things in the air at night. And then, of course, the American Airlines flight, the pilots, we understand, were highly experienced, according to the CEO. They would have flown this flight path many times before and would have been very used to coming into Reagan Airport to land. But as to how they got into a position where they crashed in midair, leading to this tragic incident, is really what everyone wants answered right now.
All right, Caroline, it's a terrible tragedy. Thank you very much for sharing those details with us. My colleague Dish has got a report as well on what this is all about. Let's take a look.
Being seen as one of US's most fatal air crashes in modern history, nearly 70 people have died in the mid-air collision that took place in Washington, D.C. in the late hours of Wednesday evening. Now, this visual shows the freak collision that took place between an American Airlines flight and a US Army Black Hawk helicopter in the late hours of Wednesday evening near the Ronald Reagan National Airport. And it shows that both aircrafts, after the collision, plummet into the Potomac River. And because of the chilly weather in Washington, D.C. and the late hours when the air crash took place, it made rescue operations quite difficult. So now let's quickly break down how this collision in fact took place. So as you can see, the map on your screen shows the flight path of both the American Airlines flight 5342 as well as the US Army Black Hawk helicopter, and this is the approximate collision site on top of the Potomac River. Now, the US Army Black Hawk helicopter was coming from Virginia, Fort Belvoir, and it was on a training flight, while the American Airlines flight 5342 was coming from Wichita, Kansas, and it was in fact carrying various members and contestants of the US figure skating competition. And in fact, reports also reveal that there were 2 Russian figure skaters also on board. Now, the American Airlines flight was carrying roughly 60 people and 4 crew, and the Black Hawk Army helicopter was carrying roughly 3 people. And it collided, and this is the approximate collision site. Now, in terms of, as you can see, the region is very close to very key US buildings, the White House, US State Capitol, Pentagon. Now, speaking of the Pentagon, hours after the crash, the Pentagon launched a probe into the matter and has launched a probe to investigate what exactly happened and how this collision, this freak collision took place. Now, it is important to note that officials have now revealed that both aircrafts were in their standard flight pattern, and which indicates that there was nothing unusual about the path that both the US Army helicopter and the flight aircraft took. So let's take a deeper look into what were the two aircrafts that were involved in this collision. Now, first is the American Airlines flight 5342. Now, this is an aircraft that was a Bombardier CRJ-700, which is one of the most common jets operating out of the Ronald Reagan Washington Airport, and is a regional jet which is frequently used on short to medium haul flights. It's a relatively smaller jet, as you can see the visual on your screen. Now, this aircraft was manufactured by Bombardier, a Canadian company, and this particular series, this model, the CRJ model, was in fact introduced 30 years ago, meaning that quite an established model of aircraft and it's popularly used. Now, while this aircraft itself can carry up to 70 people, in this particular case, there were about 60 passengers on board and 4 crew. Now, the aircraft is roughly 106 feet wide, and it has a wingspan of 76 feet. So again, a relatively smaller aircraft than others that are seen. Now, looking at the US Army helicopter, which is designated as PAT-25, this is a US Army UH-60 Blackhawk, which is built by Sikorsky, Sikorsky aircraft is a part of the defense giant Lockheed Martin.